We are wired to care what others think. That wiring made sense for most of human history. Belonging to the group used to mean food, shelter, safety. Rejection could literally kill you. Today the world looks different, but that old circuit remains alive and loud. It sabotages careers, ruins relationships, and empties good lives of meaning. The real work is not getting rid of care entirely, but reconfiguring where you look for approval, so your life responds to what you value, rather than to passing applause. This essay is a map for that work. It is not a pep talk, or a list of pithy slogans. It is a practical, psychological, philosophical manual for reclaiming your attention, your choices, and your voice. Expect honesty, concrete practice, and examples that show how this is done in the messy world, not in a retreat center. The problem? Precisely. When you live to please others, you are essentially outsourcing your standards. Your identity becomes a patchwork of other people's expectations. You dress for someone else's taste. You speak to avoid discomfort. You postpone projects because you fear judgment. This pattern corrodes authenticity. It also creates anxiety because other people's opinions are unstable, reactive, and often hostile to nuance. They are weather, not bedrock. Psychologically, what you feel when someone judges you lights up the same circuits as physical pain. Social rejection registers in the brain as threat. That is why a single critical comment can rattle your whole day. The modern amplifier is social media, where approval and disapproval arrive in measurable quantities. That pupillating scoreboard conditions behavior. Likes train you to perform, not to exist. So the first step is to understand you are not weak or immoral for caring. You are human. The goal is to change the reward structure inside your life, from external validation to inner standards and deliberate commitments. That is where freedom starts. Why we seek approval? Approval is shorthand for many things. It is safety, status, belonging, an answer to meaning. In evolutionary terms, being noticed by the group meant resources and reproduction. In modern terms, approval signals acceptance in social systems that distribute opportunities. The brain learns fast, behave in ways that win praise, repeat those actions. Over time the habit becomes identity. There are psychological mechanisms that keep the pattern in place. Mirror neurons help you simulate others' emotions so you can fit in. Normative social influence makes you align with group expectations to avoid ostracism. Cognitive biases, like the spotlight effect, magnify your sense of other people's attention. You believe everyone notices your every misstep. Attachment styles shape how desperate you become for approval. An anxious attachment makes praise feel like oxygen. Knowing these mechanisms is not philosophical trivia, it's strategy. When you can name the machinery that hijacks your choices, you can begin to short-circuit it. The inner architecture of liberation. Freedom from the slave of opinion comes from building three things: a stable inner standard, competence that anchors your confidence, and an environment that reduces noisy judgment. A stable inner standard means you decide what matters, why it matters, and what actions follow. It is values-based. When you can answer plainly what you are willing to sacrifice for and why, other people's comments grow quieter. For example, an artist who defines success as producing a body of work over a decade, rather than instant likes, can weather rejection and ridicule. The criterion is internal, measurable, and time-tested. Competence is the second pillar. Skill produces a kind of quiet authority. When you can do something well, you have less reason to bargain for approval. Competence does not eliminate fear, but it compresses it into manageable dimensions. The writer who has shipped a book, the coder who launched a product, the speaker who filled a room, these experiences create a bank of evidence you can draw on when others doubt you. The environment is the third pillar. Humans are social animals. If you live in a feedback loop that constantly punishes originality, liberation will be hard. You must curate your tribe. That does not mean isolating yourself in a bubble of sycophants, but choosing contexts where disagreement is tolerated and experiment is rewarded. Philosophy that helps: reorienting purpose. Many traditions point to the same pivot: you cannot control others, only your actions and judgments. Stoicism offers a clear lens. Marcus Aurelius taught that the outer world is not in your power, only your reactions are. Stoic practice is not coldness, it is focused agency. Buddhism points to non-attachment, not as nihilism, but as a method for clarifying what is yours and what is not. Existentialists say meaning is chosen and created, not discovered ready-made. All these converge on one actionable idea: if you orient your life toward chosen values, the noise of opinion becomes background static. But this is not an invitation to moral grandstanding or arrogance. Values must be tested against results and empathy. The point is not to ignore consequences, but to accept responsibility for how you judge them. That responsibility is empowering because it returns the authorship of your life to you. Practical strategies, step by step. Change is built from practice. Here are techniques that work, described in ways you can apply immediately. First, clarify your metric. Write down the 3 principles that, if you followed them for a year, would make your life worth living. Make them specific. Avoid vague goals like be happy. Prefer something like ship 1 project every 3 months, or read 4 books per month, or send handwritten notes to 3 people a month. A clear metric turns approval into raw data. When someone criticizes your book cover and your metric is finished drafts, the critique loses urgency. Second, perform controlled exposure. If social pain is real, expose yourself to it in small doses. Speak up in a meeting just once, on a harmless point. Post a short essay exposing an opinion you hold. Expect discomfort. Learn that the world keeps turning. Repeated exposure dilutes the conditioning that says other people's judgment equals ruin. Third, run thought experiments on the worst case. The worst thing someone can say or do usually feels catastrophic in the moment. Sit with the worst case and write out what happens next. Most catastrophes resolve without apocalypse. Do the math. How bad is the damage in tangible terms? Often it's reparable. This is cognitive reframing. Nietzsche called it amor fati, love of fate. Modern psychology calls it premortem and acceptance. Fourth, practice saying no. Saying no is how you build sovereignty. Start small and escalate. Say no to a meeting you don't want. Say no to a favor that drains your resources. You will feel guilt at first. Guilt is not a reliable moral compass. Learn to distinguish guilt that protects others from neglect, and guilt that enforces another person's unreasonable expectations. Fifth, cultivate solitude. Time alone is not avoidance, it's calibration. Solitude lets you hear your own voice without the chorus. Regular periods of solitude, walks, long baths, early morning writing, create an inner referee. Many creative thinkers use this rhythm of solitude and sociality. It brings clarity to who you are, so other people's opinions don't displace you. Sixth, build competence through practice, not performative display. Competence is quiet. It is earned through repetition. Choose one field, pursue mastery, and let the results speak louder than posturing. The paradox is that competence often reduces the need for approval because success delivers its own proof. Seventh, curfew your media. Social feeds are engineered to maximize attention, not your flourishing. Limit the scrolling window. Replace the habit with one that aligns with your metric. Read quality writing instead of status updates. In 30 days you will notice how much less tethered you feel. Eighth, rehearse a public script for criticism. Decide how you will respond to common attacks. Will you answer with data, with humor, with silence? Planning reduces reactivity. You become an architect of response, not a hostage. Ninth, practice radical honesty with trusted allies. Tell 3 people what matters to you, and ask for feedback not in praise but in questions. This calibrates you to criticism that is constructive rather than identity-threatening. 10th, find mentors who have weathered contempt. People who have done what you aim to do and lived through the slings and arrows are priceless. Their presence diminishes the existential stakes of being judged. Habits that anchor identity. Daily rituals shape identity more than isolated acts. Adopt a morning ritual that reinforces your standard. Read a passage that aligns with your chosen values, write a 2-sentence plan for the day tied to your metric, and perform one tiny act of courage before the day begins. The cumulative effect of these micro-practices is identity change. The person who repeatedly does the small hard things stops being a slave to approval because their life is anchored in habitual evidence. Nighttime rituals matter too. End the day with a log of what you did that aligned with your values, and what you will do tomorrow. This creates a private ledger of integrity that no external applause can rewrite. Reframing relationships. This work often collides with people who define you by expectations. Parents, lovers, bosses, old friends, each carries a map of who you are supposed to be. Reframing relationships is not about cruelty, it is about negotiation. Explain your metric, your reasons, and the behaviors you are changing. Some people will resist. Expect that. This is part of differentiation. You can keep the relationship and change the terms, or you may let some relationships go. That choice defines the quality of your future tribe. When confrontation arrives from someone who resists your change, respond with curiosity. Ask what they fear in your shift. Often their pushback is about their own loss of role or status, not your worth. That insight helps you respond with empathy while holding your line. The role of reputation and integrity. A useful distinction: attention is not the same as reputation. Short bursts of attention are shallow. Reputation is long-lived and built on consistent action. Trade short-term applause for long-term reputation. When you orient toward reputation, how you are seen by those whose opinion actually matters, you cut the noise. Reputation grows in the company of competence and integrity, not in the hottest trending moment. Do the work. Show up. Fail publicly, recover privately, and persist. That pattern is boring and brutal, and it produces a kind of dignity that outlasts the loudest applause. Stories that teach. There are patterns in real lives that illuminate this path. A stand-up comedian who survived the first hostile room learns to test the audience, not chase them. The engineer who ships a product and ignores the early critics because the product's users speak louder. The activist who refuses to bend their core principle in exchange for popularity. Each took small acts that aligned with a metric, and then tolerated the social friction until inertia favored them. Nelson Mandela endured scorn and imprisonment, not by craving approval, but by anchoring his identity to a vision that survived the crowd's opinion. On the other end, there are figures who chased praise, currying favor until their inner life was hollow. Their lives become cautionary tales. We do not all need the scale of Mandela, we need the same inner logic. Clarify long-term principles and accept short-term exile. The cost and the payoff. This path is not painless. Expect loneliness, misjudgment, and temporary setbacks. Expect friends to disappear and new ones to arrive. Expect that in the early phase you will feel less popular and more solid. The payoff is worth it. You will make decisions for reasons that last. You will sleep better. You will find the courage to produce work that matters. You will be less reactive and therefore more creative, more generous, and more effective. Most importantly, you will stop being moved by the weather of public opinion and will start directing the climate of your life. Final practice: a simple 30-day program. For the next 30 days, do this daily. Awake, write one line that reminds you of your metric, complete one small task that advances that metric before checking email, expose yourself to one minor social risk, a comment, a new post, a question in a meeting, and close the day by logging whether your action aligned with your chosen metric. Weekly, remove a habit that amplifies others' opinions, social feed scrolling, constant availability, and replace it with a habit that builds competence, reading, practice, outreach to a mentor. Keep repeating. Let data, not fear, shape your adjustments. Slow, consistent practice rewires you. You will not become immune to opinion, no one is. But you will become resilient, you will learn to choose which opinions matter, and your life will start to reflect your values rather than the applause of the nearest crowd. There is a hard and freeing truth at the end of this work. Other people's opinions will always exist because we live among people. The question is who adjudicates your worth. Will you hand that job to the passing mob, or will you take it back and run it from inside your chest? That is the shift. It is not triumphalist or solitary. It is practical, accountable, and alive. Your life is not a performance for strangers. It is a practice of consistent acts, measured by standards you choose, practiced under pressure, and improved over time. Begin today. Choose the first small thing that will be done regardless of applause. Do it, and watch how quietly, inevitably, your sense of freedom begins to grow.